Okay, William, wonderful to be with you. I'm going to go ahead and do some introductions. I'm Tim Cohen, author of The Antichrist and a Cup of Tea, a forthcoming Messiah, History in the Tribulation Period, multi-volume series, and then also some very interesting works on exobiology and Mars and other bodies in our solar system that by the time you who are viewing this and listening to this will be able to obtain through Prophecy House. That's PROPHECYHOUSE.com. ProphecyHouse.com, that's my publisher. And my guest, William Whitecrow, who is a whistleblower in the secret space program arena and who has testified of having been on Mars with Andrew Basiago, Brett Stillings, William Stillings, and others. And the purpose of the interview today is to begin to make it known to the world that in fact there is hard evidence that some individuals such as William have in fact been on Mars, and that Mars has complex biological life both from the past and the present, roaming its surface and under its surface. And so I know this sounds pretty strange to a lot of you folks who are listening to this for the first time, but you're going to see some pretty incredible photos that are just the tip of the iceberg of what I offer in these books that are now available through Prophecy House, now as in by the time you actually watch and hear this. And these photos are going to simply blow your mind. So William, I began a few months ago by introducing myself to you through Andrew Basiago, and I'd spoken at length with Andy before that, and then we did about 10 hours of interviews, you and I. And in those interviews, you hadn't heard about any of this stuff that we're about to look at today. You hadn't heard anything about me before we had pretty much completed those interviews. So you didn't know what it is that I was trying to accomplish, nor what it is that I would present to you. And in those interviews, I had you describe for me creatures that you encountered on Mars in as much detail as you could recall. And I had you describe for me weapons that you used on Mars. And one of those was a device that Andrew Basiago has referred to as a flash gun. And you called it alternately a pulse pistol in our interview. And I had you describe that for me in detail. And after that, toward the end of our 10 hours of interviews, I asked you to look up a photo on the internet, to just Google Mars handgun. And then you came up with a photo like this one that we're looking at here now on the screen. And so folks, I'm just going to point out by moving the mouse cursor around this, where you see the mouse rotating, this is something that looks like a pistol of sorts that was photographed by one of NASA's rovers on the surface of Mars. And I had William Whitecrow pull this up. So I'm circling it. Now I'm going to go to a larger version. That's the same thing right there. I'm flipping back and forth between the photos. So here's the enlarged photo. And this is not cleaned up in any way. You're looking at the raw photo. It hasn't been touched up in the slightest. No adjustments at all. This is as NASA presented it. Yet again, this is the same thing that we see right here in the background. So you can see rocks, or what appear to be rocks, all around it. And this is obviously grossly different in appearance. So we've got 3 different photos that NASA took of this, all from the same distance roughly. 2 of the 3 are better quality than the last one there. So this is the first one. So William, could you please describe for me your impression and your reaction when you first saw this?
Well, when you first told me about this, first we did the interview, and you really got in detail, you had me describe everything to a T, and then after that, you contacted me and told me, I want you to look at something. When you gave me the photo, when I looked it up, it took me less than a minute to call you back. After I'd viewed the photo, this is one of the weapon systems that we had on Mars. There is no doubt about that. What's really interesting is I felt like a little kid in a candy store here because I'd never seen anything like this. I don't go looking at NASA photos or anything. Other people send stuff to me. But what was really interesting is your in-depth interview and asking me about this thing and the handle and the form of the barrels and how your power pack clips into it and everything like this. And then I seen it. It made my heart race. It was really fascinating to see this, and I called you immediately and told you this is one of the things that we used right here. It was just an amazing that you were able to find something. This is a medium-range weapon right here. The reason we call them pulse, Andy calls them flash. During my training, we were told that they were more of a pulse-type weapon, which is the same thing as Andy was saying and everything, just a different description, terminology used. But in security, we're going to use different terminologies than other individuals. So I was blown away, and my wife was too, because I talked about things of this nature, and then all of a sudden we see a picture of it right here on Mars itself. I can't say how happy I was to see this, to be honest with you, because I didn't think I'd ever see anything like this again, to be honest with you. I thought what was there in the programs I was in was just that they keep things so compartmentalized and so secret that you don't see this stuff anymore. When you pulled this up, it gave me a sigh of relief, to be honest with you. It really did.
Yeah, this is just a photo on the surface of Mars taken by a NASA rover.
Yeah, I was happy about that, but at the same time, it brought back a lot of memories, of other things that had taken place there with weapon systems and confrontations and things of this nature. So it helped a lot of the healing process, of coming out and telling people what I knew and what I've seen. And like you said, I've never heard of you before. I figured it was just another interview, and here it is. You start bringing out factual evidence that talked about what I talked about. So William, I can't say enough.
Can you tell us about what year you were on the surface of Mars, the period in which you were on the surface of Mars, and when you were there with Andy, and how you got there versus how he got there, just very briefly for some context for the audience, because they're going to say, how did this guy get to Mars? We can't get there with a rocket. So just, give people some understanding briefly.
Yeah, very true. The first times that we went, you have different craft out there, TR-3B, TR-3, the MAT, things of this nature. Everything was done by anti-grav technology, basically, reverse engineered technology, things of this nature. So that's how we got there at first. It was by craft, but not by rocket engines and things of this nature. The first early craft, they had the anti-grav technology, but at the same time, they had to have thrusters where entering atmospheres and things of this nature. It was a little bit different. I don't know the whole technology. That's their aspect. I was into the security aspect. So I had been picked to start training individuals as well here for the journey to Mars. When they got there, they would know what to expect, close quarters, because there were still some fairly dangerous aspects of Mars to be in there because of some of the creatures and everything. So I started training individuals. That was my job early in the 70s, early 70s, 60s and stuff like this. I had experiences, which we won't go into at this time, but when I got into the military, that's when I started working with people in training. And that even continued on when we went to Vietnam and everything of this nature. But the time dilation things that they can do now is just amazing. So after a period of time, the technology had been reverse engineered. Some of the Tesla technologies, this is very important for people to understand. Tesla technology, and with the help of other beings, I will say, and we would call them extraterrestrials or whatever, was able to take this technology and refine it down to teleportation, the time travel aspects, and the teleportation really came in big time, and it still is in use right now, between ships, between planets, things of that nature. So the last part, when I was working within the programs and everything, about midway on up, was when they started using teleportation technologies. We didn't have to use ships anymore, but we could only do a few at a time. Now the technology is where you can just run people through and have them go to wherever you want. At that time, you can only take a few through at a time. And from what I've heard from other people in the program now, that is way far beyond where we're at now.
So you went there initially by ship, and I know Andrew Bjago has said he never went by ship. He went by Mars Jump Room facility out of a couple of
Yes.
locations, one in El Segundo, California. He's described that several times in his various interviews and presentations. That's how he got there, and you acted as kind of a guard to Andy when he was there, him and Brett Stillings. And one of the things that you and Andrew have separately described in interviews to me and to others was that you had encountered pterodactyl-like creatures also on Mars that were dive bombing you, against which you had to defend yourselves. And you just mentioned in this interview a couple minutes back that there were dangerous creatures on Mars. So I've mentioned the pterodactyl. Could you describe for us another creature that you told me about in our interviews before? Again, I showed you or told you about anything that I have described, that you described to me, that I've now shown you a photo of a creature, and I'm going to show that here in our conversation for the audience. But tell us about that.
Well, basically, there was I called it a pig-type creature, more of a ridgeback, and those people that hunt understand what a ridgeback is. It is a pig and everything with a ridge of hair across the back and everything. And I've seen several where they're in herds and everything on Mars as well. And that is one of the creatures that when you showed a picture, I was another shocked again. Now, you're the only one that's been able to do this to me so far. And there's a lot of them. They're very herd. There's taller ones, bigger ones and shorter ones. The ones that I had talked about and everything really weren't more dangerous to us and everything. They had the ability. There's a lot of creatures that are under the surface of Mars and everything, and these are things that they can dig with their snout down and get and everything. And I give a pretty detailed example of that, along with several others, more of the the pterodactyl aspect, but also there was more that were more dinosaur looking, like Andrew had said, the plesiosaurus type situation. Mm-hmm. So there was quite a few different things there that we had talked about. But when you showed me the picture of the one individual, that one with the write-off, and then where this creature is looking up and you can see its snout and its eyes and everything exactly as I described. It was just amazing to see the pictures after the fact, after you had interviewed me, and I'd never seen anything like that. And then you showed me the pictures. It was another, I guess you would say, life-changing moment right there,
Okay. So you mentioned Andy's plesiosaurus. I'll just give a little context to that, and then we'll look at some of these creatures. Andrew Bjago, a number of years back, 2008, 2009, both in writing published and then also in interviews that he gave publicly, described a creature that he called a plesiosaur. And he's not talking about the plesiosaur that today's paleontologists on Earth would be describing. That's just what he named this creature. And he described it as a creature having a long snake-like neck, a horse-like head, and a kind of tortoise-like short body. And very, very weird hybrid-sounding kind of a creature. And I just want to mention also, William, that your pig-like creature that you described for me and that we're going to see is also a hybrid creature. In other words, it's not an actual boar like you would see on Earth. It has some differences, but it also has some striking similarities. And so I showed you a fossil, something that I originally thought was a sculpture, but actually was not a sculpture. It was a fossil, I since learned, of Andrew Bjago's plesiosaur. And I had this photo and been aware of this thing on Mars quite a while before I ever heard of the existence of Andrew Bjago. And I hadn't heard of the existence of you or Andy or the Mars Jump Room program or any of that until quite a while after I had this photo of this plesiosaur type thing. And when I heard Andy describe that, knowing that he described it years before the photograph that I have was ever taken, it was mind-blowing to me, and it was strong, compelling evidence that Andy, I believed, had been on Mars. There's no way he could have known about that thing otherwise, and described it years before a photo of it was ever taken. And Andy, of course, has testified to the fact that you were on Mars with him. You have testified to the fact that he was on Mars with you. You've both testified to the fact that you had to defend yourselves and William Brett Stillings against dive-bombing pterodactyls on Mars. And you described those things for me, both of you, in the interviews. And so, again, Andrew Bjago, even now as we're doing this recording, has not seen these photos that I'm showing to you. I've told him about some of them, but he has not seen them. So let's move on, and I'll ask you to describe for me some of these photos and what you're seeing in them. So we'll move past the flash gun or pulse pistol here.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so this is a creature, and folks, you're seeing the photo not edited. It's the raw photo. It's enlarged. This is a creature that I thought, I thought initially might be the pterodactyl that you guys had described as being on Mars. I don't think that's what it is now, but I'd like you to just tell me your impression of this one.
Well, this is very similar to what we were talking about, but it isn't it. You can see the eye sockets and the lobes over the eyes. You can see the extended beak. It's not as long as a pterodactyl. You can see the kind of the pointy aspect of the back of the head. This one looks like it's sitting here kind of like with wings folded in front of it, I guess you could say. It's definitely looking out towards across the canyon for sure. This is very similar to one of the pterodactyls. It's not exactly, what we had encountered, but there was many different life forms that we were told to be aware of and everything. This is not the dangerous one that came after us that Andy and I had the conflict with when I was his security on Mars, when I brought him out into the open heading for another place where I had tossed him the weapon. It's very important for people to see things like this. You can even see the beak color in this. That's amazing.
Well, and I'll just say that this creature is looking out across a short valley at a dinosaur-like creature that's peering back at it. I'm not going to show that creature here. And again, this is not a cleaned up image. I'm just showing it kind of raw to everyone. It's a crop, and the images in the published books will be cleaner along with the raw images so that these can be independently checked out and verified by everyone. So let's go on and look at the actual pterodactyl. So this was a creature that I thought initially might be your pterodactyl.
Okay.
Let me go back to it.
Nope. There you go.
There we go. Okay. So there were, 4 photos that NASA took of this. And in 3 of the 4, it smudged the head right off the top. So when you look at this, you can't really see a bird-like head in this one. But you see a body that looks like it could have folded wings, kind of like a bat. And the body here as if it were leaning against something or standing upright. So it's not completely clear what this is, but I looked at this and I thought, could that be a bird or a pterodactyl? And then when I found the other photos, and this is a raw photo, not cleaned up. This one is totally raw. One of the 4. You can see very clearly in this one, it's the same image, the head, and it's been sheared off to the left, as if NASA in 3 of the 4 images tried to smudge it right off so you couldn't see it, you couldn't make out what it is, like right here. But they missed one of the 4 images in this one. So when I adjust the color on this a little bit, it becomes even more obvious that you've got a beak-like head, beak-like nose and mouth right here.
It's looking right at you.
Yeah, and again, this is not an enhanced or cleaned up image, folks. I just adjusted the colors a little bit. When this is cleaned up, it will be more evident. So that's it sharpened right there. So we've sharpened it and adjusted the colors a little bit. Look at how obvious the beak is on the head on this thing.
That is amazing.
And imagine that over, this body right here, because that's the same creature. So I suspect that is a pterodactyl or a creature like it on Mars. What's your impression, William?
Very similar, friend. Part of the reason that I say that and everything is because you can see one of the wings it's like I'm turning sideways, along with it because it is an amazing picture. This I've seen this. It's got one of its, kind of how I guess a good example would be fruit bats here in the United States. The big foxes and everything that they call, and they pull their wings in like this, and this is what you see. But you could definitely see, the mouth aspect of it, the eyes there, and you can tell that part of the head has been cut off, and it's been kind of like they do on the Mars pictures and the Moon pictures. It's been kind of chopped off and phased, kind of where you can't really see everything. And it's a few times that you can see that, but the head is very, very similar, and the structure here, of course, it's fuzzed out a little bit.
Well, here they sheared it off to the left. You can sort of see the beak right here a little bit, but hardly.
Yeah.
The shape is there, but you can't really make it out. And they sheared it off to the left of the body. Really to the right if you were looking out from its perspective, but to the left from ours. And if we go back over here again, again, this is it again. So if we just sharpen this a little bit, you can see it really clearly right here. And auto adjust the colors again. Really obvious. So I think that's evidence of your pterodactyl on Mars.
Wow, amazing.
So
I've never seen these pictures until you showed them to me, and it gives me hope. It gives me hope that the truth is finally going to come out, and people are going to know exactly what's really going on, because they need to. They really need to.
They do. It's evidence that there really is a secret space program. It's evidence that you and presumably Andrew Basiago have been, in fact, on Mars. And those two things alone show that there's been massive lying by governments to the populations of the world.
Definitely.
So
definitely.
Let's go on to some other photos here. So this is your little pig-like creature.
There it is.
Again, this is not a cleaned up photo, folks, and you're looking at actually at least 3 distinct creatures in the foreground here. This one right here, and this kind of just to the right of the center, below the center right here. And the head is pretty difficult to make out on this photo. And then another little creature right over here. It's got a snout, a couple of ears, an eye visible, the legs, really short legs on its body. Almost like it's being chased by this pig-like creature right here diagonally across the photo from upper right to bottom left. And this is an enlarged image. It's not the best enlargement. It has not been cleaned up at all. And if we simply sharpen this a little bit and then adjust the colors a little bit, what a difference.
Wow.
There's the creature again. You can see the snout, obvious shadow below it, so it's popped up above the ground. Pig-like nose, eyes, ridged forehead, and then this strange back that it's got. And then these legs that come down that are kind of hard to make out. But nonetheless, you can see there's a lot of structure there, and that we're not looking at a rock. That's a creature.
Oh, no, you're not looking at a rock. This right here has its head up. You can see the structure of the face, the snout aspect of it, the eyes, the legs, everything. This is exactly what I described to you in our interview. Yeah. And, it does. Now that you mentioned it, and I had thought about that before, but it really does look like it's kind of getting a better view of whatever it's looking at over here, probably that.
Yeah, this thing right here, this other creature at the bottom left.
This is amazing. It really brings back some memories there.
Yeah. And this thing, you can see the shadow of the mouth, the chin. I'm looking at that bottom left creature. The feet, for the legs. Obvious ear, obvious eye area right here.
Wow.
So 2 very distinct creatures in this photo, and then another one in between them, just below. That's difficult to make out, but believe it or not, folks, that also is a creature. And there are others in this photo that are just too difficult for the average person to see, so I'm not going to bother describing them, but I'll say that there's more than 3 just in what we're looking at. So, yeah, I was blown away when I found this photo, and when you described it for me in the interview, I just thought, wow. It's such a bizarre sounding creature, the way that you described it with the snout like a pig and then the ridged back, and it's really a strange sounding creature. And I was reminded, when you described that in our interview, of Andrew Basiago's plesiosaur, though obviously this is not that creature. But I thought, another unique thing that only one person has ever described, and here's a photo of it. It's evidence that you were there. No one else has shown this photo to the world. No one else knows about this photo as we're recording this interview.
That's amazing. I'm really surprised nobody else has identified these things that, you and I, in an interview, we're able to get detailed information, and then you pop up with these photos. That's amazing. I mean, this is a necessary thing. More of this needs to get out there. And, I know you're going to find more. I just looking at what you've done and the things you've showed me, it's really given me a hope in a lot of ways. And Andrew, too, I know, because he described a lot of things like you said. And we're finally finding these things in fossilization and pictures that NASA themselves is taking. You can't get any better than that right there. You really can't.
Yeah, you can't. And actually, I think that these are probably, most likely, what we're looking at right here, living creatures. I don't think that these are fossils, most likely. But there's
this one up
creatures.
Here, that's a living creature. The one on the right, as I'm looking at it, the right top right there, the pig-looking one, that's not a fossil at all, in any way, shape, or form.
So let's move on and take a look at Andrew Basiago's plesiosaur.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another one that I said a little bit earlier when we were talking. Is something that I knew about. NASA took a few photos of this. This is one of the clearest ones that I knew about before I ever heard of Andrew Basiago or you. And when I first saw this, I thought, man, the Martians are Satanists. They're creating statues or sculptures of serpents, on the surface, because it's exactly what this looks like. But I came to realize subsequently that this is not a sculpture or a statue. It is, in fact, a fossil that was produced through some form of flash fossilization, where fossilization can happen extremely rapidly, and basically the entire outline of a creature, and oftentimes even the organs internally, can be preserved in terms of within the fossil. So this is a raw image. It is not cleaned up at all. It's as NASA photographed it. If we just adjust the colors a little bit here, folks, I'll just do auto adjust colors. Look at how much clearer that becomes. It hasn't been sharpened or anything. So what we have is a horse-like head right here. This is the eye. I don't know if you can see the cursor, but I've got it over the eye.
Yeah.
Kind of a horse-like shaped head, a serpent S-like shaped neck, and then a tortoise-like fat body back here, probably with another fossil on the very end of it, though that's not certain, the head of one. But nonetheless, that's a very clear image of what Andrew Basiago described. And here's the thing sharpened a little bit. There's a lot of more in the photo, unfortunately, but like I said, this isn't the only one. NASA took a few photos of this. This is just one that I think is among the clearest. And I'll undo that sharpening. Again, there it is.
Wow.
And when I clean this up for the book, which it'll be by the time you folks finally get to actually see this, the books will be out. You'll be able to see the raw images, go back and find the original source images on NASA's websites. And then you'll also see the cleaned up images in the books. And as I've said, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what I'm bringing out in terms of evidence of complex biology, both past and present, on Mars. I will also be bringing out comparable evidence concerning our moon and concerning comets and asteroids in our solar system and other bodies beyond that even. So this is bigger than Roswell in the sense that all the evidence is going to be independently verifiable. It's all officially sourced. Nobody's going to be capable of denying it. And what you have seen and heard in this interview is hard evidence that we've had human beings on Mars and elsewhere in our solar system, completely contrary to everything that NASA, our government, and other governments around the world have been saying for several decades now. So When I first showed this to you, William, can you tell me what your reaction was to it?
Shock and happiness, to be honest with you. I'm a scientific-minded individual. I want to see facts and everything, and after what Andrew's describing, what I've described, and everything, and then you're showing us the evidence here. I mean, Andrew and I can't jump back and go do what we did before. Because once you're out of the programs, you don't see anybody or anything anymore, with very few exceptions. When I seen this right here, I knew this was fossil right here, exactly what Andrew had described. There's no doubt in my mind about it, and especially the body. Things of this nature and the back aspect of it and everything, but you cannot, you could just look at this and tell what it is. The head, the shape, the ear aspects, the eyes, where the mouth would be and everything, the neck coming around and coming right back into this other structure, which is of a turtle-like thing. But also, if you look in that structure, you can see what looks very similar to like rib structure in there in a few places. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty well astounded at your ability to find these things that we've been talking about and really verify them. I haven't seen anybody else really come up with the photos and things that we've described, except for you. Structures, of course, everybody's running into them, but the life forms, that's the key right there. The weapon, that's another key right there. They can't deny that. Yeah. They just can't.
Yeah, and so this is what I wanted to cover today. I'm going to wrap up by, again, describing myself a little bit and where these things can be found. Once you folks who are seeing this and listening to this actually get to see it, you'll have available to you a great deal more in my published books. So, William, again, just wrap it up. Tell us about your background again briefly, how people can contact you or get more information from you, and then I'll do likewise.
Sure. My name is William Wycrow. WilliamWycrow.com. I'm on Facebook as well, Twitter, LinkedIn as well. Just William Wycrow, search for me in any of those and you'll find me. My experiences, I've been involved in limited access programs, secret space program for sure, 100% there. I've had experiences all my life with other technologies, other beings and everything, and I never talked about them. It took Andrew several years, about 30 years to find me, and another year or so on top of that just to get me to come out. That I didn't want to talk about it anymore. But I'm glad I did, because now the proof, the evidence, and technology is there to show exactly what we talked about is real. It is not a figment of an imagination. Why would two different people from two different aspects of life have the same experiences? The things that we did in those programs are finally coming out, and I'm happy they are. You've done some fantastic work here, Tim. That's about the best I could say right there. And I'm looking forward to finding out more.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll just say, the Lord led me to this. There are innumerable people around the world trying to find these things, and the photos are available. They're out there. It's just that the sheer volume and size of so many of these photos, one human being could spend their entire life going through the photos that are already out there and never get through everything carefully. So really, God has led me to this. He kind of dropped it in my lap. It's not something I ever expected to be involved with or to be researching or pursuing. And I've decided to do it because I think it's just that important. And again, my name is author Tim Cohen, Cohen. I'm the author of The Antichrist at Cup of Tea, as well as the forthcoming Messiah, History, and the Tribulation Period multi-volume series, which you can find both of those on a website called prophecyhouse.com, prophecyhouse.com. And then additionally, a series of books that deal with Mars, the Moon, comets and asteroids, other bodies in our solar system, and secret space programs, and deals with the complex biology on all of those, and shows how all of that lines up much better with the idea of a creationist account, believe it or not, of the universe and of our solar system, rather than what modern cosmologists and astronomers and so forth have claimed and evolutionists claim. So shockingly, this evidence, what I'm going to be presenting, goes beyond just showing that NASA and the government have been lying about where we've been in our solar system.
Oh yeah, I'm blown away.
And I'll just say,
really
on this last photo that we're looking at, this photo is actually sitting in the midst of a bunch of artificial structures on Mars. I have cropped it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff around this thing that none of you guys are getting to see that's going to be in the book. So,
Fantastic.
artificial structures, in other words, evidence of the use of high technology. So, William, thank you. I'm going to stop our interview here, stop the recording, and God bless you. So let's see how this turns out, and hopefully the whole world will get to see this and know the truth finally.
You betcha. Thank you very much for interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.